On a frozen street under the pale light of alien stars, a young girl clutched a single coin in her trembling hand. Her last $2. She moved from door to door, whispering the same words. Please, I just need a warm bed for tonight. But every door slammed shut. Every innkeeper looked away. To them, she was nothing less than nothing. Her breath grew weaker, her steps slower. Snowflakes clung to her thin clothes as if the world itself wanted to bury her. Then, through the crowd of cold faces, one figure stopped. A human traveler. His eyes didn't look at her with disgust, but with something different. She lifted her hand, showing the coin. Her voice breaking. I only have $2. Will that be enough? And in that moment everything began to change. Asterisk under the pale light of an alien moon. The streets were covered in frost. The city was alive with movement. Yet for her, it felt colder than empty space. The girl walked slowly, her hands tight around a single coin. It was all she had left, her last $2. She whispered the number in her mind again and again, as if repeating it would somehow turn it into more. But no matter how many times she counted, it was still just 2. Not enough for food. Not enough for a room. Barely enough for hope. Her thin clothes did little against the biting air. She pulled her cloak tighter, but it didn't help much. People passed her by without a glance. She stopped at a doorway, the warm glow of an inn spilling out into the street. For a moment, she let herself dream of a soft bed, a blanket, and a single night of safety. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The innkeeper glanced at her. His eyes narrowed, already judging before she spoke. She placed the coin on the counter and whispered, Please, I only need a bed. One night, the man shook his head before she even finished. Not enough. Try somewhere else. Her heart sank. She picked up the coin and stepped back out into the cold. She tried again at another door, and another. Each time the answer was the same. Shaking heads, cold stares, doors closing. The city was filled with warmth and light, but none of it was for her. She walked further, her steps heavy, her breath misting in the air. The streets grew quieter, the lamps dimmer. She felt her legs weaken. She pressed her back to a wall, staring at the coin in her hand. $2. She whispered, Is that all I am worth now? A group of people walked by, laughing together. She lowered her head, hoping they wouldn't notice her. They didn't. To them, she was invisible. A shadow on the edge of the street. Her chest tightened with a quiet despair, but she kept moving. One more in, she told herself. Maybe one more would have mercy. She approached the door, her hands shaking as she pushed it open. Inside, warmth rushed over her face, almost painful after the cold. The innkeeper looked up, his expression already hard. She placed the coin down, her voice breaking as she begged, Please, it's my last. I only want a warm bed. But once again, the words she feared most returned. Not enough. She turned, her eyes stinging. The world outside seemed colder than before. Her legs wobbled as she stepped into the street. For a moment she thought of lying down right there on the stone path, letting the night take her. But something inside refused. She couldn't give up. Not yet. She stumbled forward, the city lights blurring. And then someone stopped. He was not like the others. His posture was calm, steady, and his eyes were fixed on her with something she hadn't seen in a long time, concern. He was human, a traveler by the look of his worn coat and pack. He studied her silently for a moment as she tried to steady her breathing. She raised her trembling hand, showing him the coin as if it were proof of her worth. Her voice was no more than a whisper. I only have $2. Will that be enough? For a moment, he didn't answer. The crowd around them kept moving, the cold wind biting, the stars watching above. Then he stepped closer. His voice was low, gentle. Why only 2? What happened to you? Her heart raced. No one had asked her that in years. No one had cared enough to ask. She opened her mouth, but no words came. The fear, the exhaustion, the shame, it all held her voice hostage. She turned her head away, ready to walk past him like she had with everyone else. But he didn't move aside. Wait, he said softly. She froze. His tone wasn't demanding. It wasn't cruel. It was steady, like a hand reaching out in the dark. Slowly, she looked back at him. For a moment, the world around her disappeared. The noise of the city, the cold of the street, it all faded. And in that stillness, one thought echoed in her mind, maybe, just maybe, this human was different. The coin slipped slightly in her hand as if even it wanted to be free of her desperate grip. Her lips parted, but before she could speak, his eyes met hers with quiet certainty. He didn't look at her like a burden. He didn't look at her like someone worthless. He looked at her like someone who mattered. And for the first time that night, hope flickered in her chest. The human's voice lingered in her mind as they stood together under the pale glow of the street lamps. For a long moment, she said nothing, only tightened her grip on the coin as if it was the only thing keeping her from breaking apart. The night was colder now, though she wasn't sure if it was the air or the weight in her chest. He didn't push her for an answer. Instead, he studied her carefully, his expression calm and almost curious. Then he adjusted the strap of his pack and asked, "Have you eaten today?" The question caught her off guard. She blinked, confused, and lowered her eyes. No one ever asked her that. No one cared enough to wonder. She shook her head, not trusting her voice to answer. The human nodded slightly, as if her silence told him everything. Without another word, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small wrapped packet. He opened it, revealing a piece of warm bread and something that smelled faintly sweet. He held it out to her. Her stomach twisted painfully at the sight of food. She wanted to reach for it, but her hand froze. Too many times, kindness had come with a hidden price. She stepped back, shaking her head quickly. I can't take that," she whispered. But he didn't move the food away. He only said quietly, "It's not a trick. I'm not asking for anything. Just eat." His words settled in her like a stone dropped into still water, rippling through her doubts. She hesitated a long moment before her hunger finally overcame her fear. Slowly, she reached out and took the food with both hands, as though it might vanish if she wasn't careful. She ate in small bites, her body trembling, not from the cold anymore, but from the sudden warmth of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Safety, even if it was just for a few breaths. When she finished, she handed the wrapping back, murmuring a soft, "Thank you." Her voice cracked on the words. The human didn't smile, but there was something in his eyes, gentle, steady, almost protective. He shook his head lightly. "You don't need to thank me." She clutched the coin again, her fingers pressing into its edges. It felt smaller now, less important compared to what he had just given her. Still, she lifted it and whispered, "It's all I have. But if you know somewhere I can sleep just for tonight, I can pay." He studied her for a moment, then glanced at the dim light of the nearest inn. He seemed to understand without asking why she couldn't stay there. He returned his gaze to her and spoke with quiet certainty. "Keep it. You don't need to pay me anything. You can stay in my room." The words struck her like a wave of sound she couldn't process. Her chest tightened, and for a moment, she forgot how to breathe. Stay with him? A stranger? A human? She shook her head, fear sparking in her eyes. "No, I can't. You don't know me." "I don't know you." He didn't argue. He only nodded, as if expecting her answer, and then said gently, "I won't force you. But the streets won't keep you alive tonight. You need warmth. That's all I'm offering." Her mind raced. Every warning she had ever heard screamed inside her. Don't trust. Don't accept. Don't believe. And yet, standing in the cold with the coin in her hand and the memory of every door shutting in her face, she felt her strength fading. The human's voice was calm, steady, unlike the harsh tones she was used to. He wasn't pulling her. He wasn't pushing. He was simply waiting for her to decide. She lifted her gaze and searched his eyes. There was no greed there, no trick, only a strange, quiet sincerity. For a moment, she almost believed it. Her lips parted, her words barely a breath. "Why are you doing this for me, human?" He didn't answer right away. He adjusted the pack on his shoulder and finally said, "Because someone should." The simplicity of his answer unsettled her. It carried no hidden weight, no demand, just truth. She swallowed hard, her throat tight. She looked at the streets behind her, dark and merciless, then at the light spilling from the inn window ahead. Neither had offered her a place, but this stranger was offering something no one else would. Her hand trembled as she lowered the coin to her side. For the first time that night, she felt the faint spark of a choice, and that choice terrified her almost as much as it gave her hope. She nodded once, slow and uncertain. He didn't smile, didn't celebrate, just turned toward the inn and motioned for her to follow. She hesitated at first, her feet heavy, then took a single step. The sound of it echoed in her chest louder than the city noise around her. Inside the inn, the warmth wrapped around her like a blanket she hadn't earned. Her heart pounded as she stood near the door, afraid to move further. The human walked to the counter, spoke a few quiet words, and handed over payment without looking back at her. The innkeeper didn't question him, didn't even glance in her direction. When he returned, he gestured toward the stairs. "It's safe," she followed slowly, her steps cautious, her mind racing with questions she didn't dare ask yet. What kind of human did this? What kind of person gave so freely when no one else would even look at her? At the top of the stairs, she paused, her hand resting on the wooden rail. The sound of voices downstairs faded. The world outside the window seemed far away. She realized that, for the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't alone. But in the stillness of that moment, another thought whispered in her mind. Quiet but sharp. What if trust came at a cost she could not yet see? The room was small but warm, the kind of space that seemed ordinary to most yet felt like treasure to her. The firelight flickered across the wooden walls, casting soft shadows. She stood near the door, her back pressed against it as though afraid that at any moment someone would throw her out. The human placed his pack on the chair and spoke gently. "You can sit. The bed is yours." His words felt unreal. She hesitated, glancing at the bed. The blanket looked soft, almost glowing compared to the thin cloth she wore. She shook her head quickly. "No, I'll stay on the floor." He studied her quietly, then shrugged. "The bed is still there if you change your mind." He didn't press her further, didn't try to convince her. Instead, he sat down by the small table, pulling out a worn notebook and writing in it. The scratch of the pen filled the silence between them. She lowered herself slowly onto the floor near the edge of the bed, clutching her coin tightly. Her eyes followed his movements with caution. He seemed calm, too calm for a stranger who had just invited someone like her into his room. That calm unsettled her almost as much as it comforted her. Her stomach twisted again, but this time not from hunger. It was the scars she carried inside, the ones she didn't let anyone see. She tugged at her sleeve, pulling it down over her wrist, but when she moved, the fabric slipped for a moment, revealing the faint shimmer of strange marks on her skin lines that glowed faintly in the firelight. Before she quickly hid them again, the human noticed. He didn't say anything right away, but his pen stopped moving. His eyes lifted to hers, calm yet curious. "Those marks," he said softly. She froze, her breath catching. Her hand tightened around her sleeve as if she could erase the moment by holding it tighter. She shook her head. "They're nothing." His gaze lingered a moment longer before he nodded and returned to his notebook, as though he respected the walls she had put up. Still, the silence between them felt heavier now, filled with questions unspoken. Minutes passed. The fire cracked gently, and outside, the night wind pressed against the window. She lowered her head, whispering almost to herself, "If they find me, I'll be gone forever." The human's pen stilled again. His voice was steady but low. Who? She didn't answer. Her body tensed, every muscle coiled as though the very mention of her hunters might draw them closer. Her hands shook, and she pulled her knees up to her chest, curling into the corner like a small shadow. The human closed his notebook quietly, placing it aside. He didn't move closer but spoke with patience. "You don't have to tell me, but if someone is after you, then you're not safe here, are you?" Her eyes flicked toward the door. She wanted to deny it, to say she was safe now, but the truth clung to her throat. She had been running too long to believe in safety. Then, faintly, she heard it. The sound of boots on the wooden floor downstairs. Voices, low but sharp, speaking to the innkeeper. Her blood ran cold. The human's head turned slightly toward the door, his brow tightening. He heard it too. She moved quickly, crawling across the floor to him, her hand clutching his arm with desperate force. Her eyes were wide, filled with fear that stripped away every wall she had tried to keep. "Don't let them see me," she whispered, her voice trembling like a fragile string ready to snap. The footsteps grew louder. A shadow passed by the door, pausing for a moment before continuing down the hall. The innkeeper's voice drifted up faintly, nervous. As if answering questions he wished he didn't have to. Her grip on the human's arm tightened. Every heartbeat felt like thunder in her chest. She waited for the door to burst open, for rough hands to drag her back into the cold night she had barely escaped. But the door never opened. The footsteps moved past, fading again down the stairs. Still, she didn't let go. Her breathing came in short bursts, her forehead pressed against his sleeve. He didn't push her away. He sat still, steady, letting her cling to him as the fear slowly began to ease. When she finally raised her head, her eyes searched his face, waiting for judgment, for rejection. Instead, he simply said, "You don't have to explain now, but I won't let them take you." His words wrapped around her like a second blanket. She wanted to believe them, but trust was a heavy door she had closed long ago. And yet, for the first time in years, she thought she heard the hinges shift, just slightly. She sat back slowly, her hands still trembling. The fire crackled, and outside the wind howled against the inn. But inside, for this one fragile moment, there was warmth, and a promise she couldn't yet understand, but one she couldn't ignore. The night stretched long, but sleep would not come to her. Every creak of the old inn made her flinch. Every gust of wind outside the window sounded like footsteps approaching. She sat near the edge of the bed, her knees drawn close, staring into the dim firelight. The human had taken the chair in the corner, resting with his eyes half closed. Though she noticed he never fully let himself sleep, he stayed alert, as if ready for anything. When dawn began to brush the horizon, a soft glow touched the window. For a moment she thought maybe, just maybe, the worst had passed. But then came the sound, the firm rhythm of boots striking stone. Not the careless steps of travelers, but the practiced stride of those who search with purpose. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. The human's eyes opened at once, sharp and steady. He rose quietly and stepped to the window, pulling the curtain just enough to look outside. Below, 3 figures in dark coats moved down the street, their heads turned side to side, scanning each corner, each doorway. Their movements were too precise, too focused. These were no simple guards. They were hunters. Her hands trembled. She whispered, "They're here." Her voice barely carried, but the fear in it said more than words ever could. The human turned to her, his tone calm though his eyes were serious. "We need to leave. Now." She shook her head, panic flashing in her gaze. "No, if we step outside, they'll see us." He crossed the room and crouched in front of her, speaking low and firm. "If we stay, they'll find us anyway. You told me they won't stop. Hiding here only delays what's coming." Her chest rose and fell quickly, torn between fear and the truth she could not deny. She looked to the door, then back at him, and finally gave a small, uncertain nod, without another word. He shouldered his pack and motioned toward the narrow back stair. They moved silently, their steps muffled by the old wood. Downstairs, the inn was quiet, but the distant murmur of voices told them the hunters had already spoken to the innkeeper. They slipped through the kitchen, past shelves of bread and jars of spices, and reached a narrow back door. The human opened it slowly, peering out. The alley behind the inn was dim, the stones wet with morning dew. It was empty for now. He gestured for her to follow. She hesitated only a moment before stepping into the cold air. The alley twisted sharply, leading away from the main street. They walked quickly, but carefully, their breaths fogging in the chill. But safety was fragile. Ahead, a shadow moved at the far end of the alley. One of the hunters stepped into view, scanning the path with an unblinking gaze. Her heart stopped. She pressed back against the wall, clutching her coin as if it could protect her. The human's arm came up gently, steadying her. He whispered, "This way," guiding her into a side passage barely wide enough for 2 people. The passage twisted and turned, a maze of stone that seemed to tighten with every step. They moved faster now, the sound of pursuit echoing behind them. A sharp beam of light swept across the alley as one of the hunters searched with a scanning device. The glow brushed against the stones only a few steps behind them. Her chest tightened with panic. "They're too close," she whispered, her voice shaking. The human didn't stop. His tone was steady, almost grounding. "Stay with me. Don't look back." They turned another corner. emerging into a wider street filled with early traders setting up stalls. The sudden noise and movement of ordinary life felt strange after the silence of fear. The human pulled her hood up quickly, hiding her face, and guided her into the crowd. The hunters appeared at the far end of the street moments later, their dark coats stark against the pale morning. They scanned the crowd, their devices humming softly. She ducked her head, clinging to the human's sleeve as he led her between carts and tables. Her every step felt like it might draw attention, like the ground itself would give her away. One of the hunters paused, turning in their direction. For an instant, his eyes swept over the crowd, passing dangerously close to where she stood. Her breath caught, her body rigid. The human shifted slightly, placing himself between her and the hunter's gaze, shielding her as though it were the most natural thing in the world. The hunter's eyes moved on. Distracted by another sound in the market, they slipped away through another side street, the voices of the crowd fading behind them. Her legs shook from the tension, but she forced herself to keep moving. Finally, when the noise of pursuit had quieted, they stopped in the shadow of an old archway. She leaned against the wall, her chest heaving. "They'll never stop. No matter where I go, they always find me." The human looked at her, his expression calm but certain. "Then we don't run forever. We go somewhere they can't follow." Her brow furrowed. "There's nowhere like that. I've tried. I've searched. And I always end up back here." But he shook his head. "You haven't tried with me yet." His words lingered in the air, heavy with a promise she didn't understand. She searched his face, looking for deception, but found only steady determination. For the first time, she wondered if perhaps he carried something she had lost long ago, a belief that escape was still possible. The sound of distant boots echoed faintly once more, reminding her the chase was not over. She pulled her cloak tighter and whispered, "If we keep running, they'll catch us." The human met her eyes, his voice calm but sure. "Then we stop running. But first, you need to trust me." Her lips parted, 100 questions pressing against her tongue, but none escaped. She only nodded faintly, though fear and doubt still tugged at her heart. And as they stepped once more into the uncertain streets, the first light of morning broke fully across the horizon, painting the world in pale gold, a fragile promise of hope. Though shadows still followed close behind, the days passed slowly. But something inside the girl began to change. For the first time in her life, she woke up without fear. She had always been treated as if she was invisible, as if her life had no worth. But now, every morning when she opened her eyes, she found the human had already prepared something simple for her: warm tea, a blanket folded neatly, or a smile that told her she was not alone anymore. These small things meant more to her than all the wealth she had once dreamed about. She often sat by the window, watching people pass on the streets below. They hurried on with their lives, not knowing that just a week ago, she had stood among them with nothing but $2 in her hand. She thought about how close she had been to giving up, how easily her story could have ended. The thought made her shiver, but then she remembered the human's hand reaching out to her that night, and the fear faded. One evening, when the stars were beginning to rise, she asked softly, "Why did you help me? You didn't even know me." The human was quiet for a moment before answering, "Because no one should feel forgotten. Not here, not anywhere. Sometimes one act of kindness is enough to change a life." His words stayed in her mind. She repeated them to herself over and over, as if they were a secret promise. She began to help around the small place they shared, sweeping the floor, preparing meals, and arranging the space with a care that surprised even her. She wanted to give back, even if she had little to offer. One night, while they sat together, a soft knock came at the door. A traveler stood there, shivering, asking for shelter. The girl froze, remembering how she had once stood in the same position. Without hesitation, the human opened the door wide and welcomed the stranger inside. The girl's eyes filled with tears as she realized she was witnessing the same kindness that had once saved her. For the first time, she saw clearly kindness was not a gift to be kept. It was something to be shared, passed forward like a flame that never burned out. That night, as the travelers slept peacefully by the fire, the girl whispered to herself, "Maybe I can be that light for someone else one day." She no longer felt like a shadow lost in the world, She was slowly discovering her place, not as someone forgotten, but as someone who mattered. And deep down, she knew this was only the beginning of a story much bigger than herself. The morning was quiet, the kind of quiet that made every sound feel important. Sunlight slipped through the small window, painting soft golden lines across the floor. The girl stood there, her hands resting gently on the windowsill, looking out at a world that once felt too cold for her to survive. Now it looked different. It looked alive. She took a deep breath, and for the first time, she did not feel small. Behind her, the human moved about as he always did, placing cups on the table, arranging things with care that seemed ordinary to him but extraordinary to her. She turned toward him, her voice soft but steady. "Do you know what you've given me?" she asked. He looked up, surprised, and simply shook his head. "You gave me more than food, more than shelter." She continued, "You gave me back the part of me I thought I lost, hope." Her words trembled at the edges, but her eyes held a quiet strength. The human said nothing at first. He only smiled, the kind of smile that carried no pride, only warmth. "Hope is not something I gave you," he replied. "It was always inside you. You just needed someone to remind you." That night, they sat by the fire again, but this time, the silence between them was not empty. It was filled with understanding. The girl thought of all the nights she had wandered the streets with nothing, clutching to worn dollars as if they were her last chance. She remembered the doors that had shut in her face, the voices that had turned her away. But she also remembered the moment when one door opened, and one hand reached out. The stranger who had once been her rescuer was no longer just that. He had become her family, not by blood, not by name, but by choice. And she knew now that family was not about where you came from, it was about who stood beside you. When the world turned its back dot as the firelight flickered across her face, she whispered a quiet promise to herself, never to let another soul feel the same emptiness. She once knew, if ever someone knocked at her door, she would open it without hesitation. Just as he had done for her. Outside, the stars shone brighter than ever, as if the universe itself wanted to remind her that even the smallest light could shine in the deepest darkness. She closed her eyes, held onto the warmth of the moment, and let herself believe that this was only the beginning of a life worth living. And somewhere in the quiet of that night, a story that had started with nothing but $2 became something priceless, a reminder that kindness can turn the smallest spark into a fire that never goes out.